Today, we cut through the noise with two experts who've dedicated their time and their lives um, to uncovering the crisis in the Congo. Sorry, I heard someone saying, yeah, yeah. Oh, this one. Okay.
So we're live now.
I'm hearing.
Okay, guys, we're just gonna do that again. Bear with us.
Sorry. So today we are cutting through the noise. We are joined by two experts who've dedicated their time to uncover the truth about the unending Congo crisis. And foreign interests have been keeping the fire burning in light of the recent escalation of violence. This episode of Pan-African Attitude could be our most important one yet. And this is a topic which is very close to my heart, as I visited Goma in 2023, and I got to see and experience the devastation of the crisis firsthand. To help us to sift through the what is going on today, we have Kambale Musavuli, a political analyst at the Center for Research on the Congo Kinshasa. He currently serves as the West Africa representative for Pan-Africanism Today's Secretariat from his base in Accra, Ghana. Welcome, Kambale.
Thank you.
We also have Maurice Carney, who is one of the co-founders of the Friends of Congo. He currently serves as the organization's executive director. Welcome, comrade.
Pleasure to be with you.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off. Let me start off with you, Kambale. The latest M23 offensive is backed by Rwandan troops on the ground and has led to over 100,000 people who were already internally displaced having to leave Goma. Yet, some Rwandans online deny there's any Rwandan involvement, including the president. Oyo, let's play the video from CNN where he's doing just that.
The president. Today, on the 3rd of February, does Rwanda currently have any troops at all in eastern DRC?
I don't know.
Okay,
You're the
Kambale.
commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
Okay, Kambale, what do you make of President Kagame's answer?
Well, it's quite a lot of emotion goes through when you hear that, right? I'm not gonna lie. When I heard it, I actually laughed, but I had to pause again, right, and think about what has been ongoing in Congo for 30 years. The loss of life, right? Millions of people have died due to the lies being perpetrated, being shared around what's happening in the Congo. So that's the second sentiment. The third one, I think, is related also to the press release we saw just coming out of the ICC yesterday, that the ICC is launching an investigation into the situation in the Congo. And because of that, his sentence of not admitting that he's in Congo is a way of protecting himself. But last, I think it's beyond just what Kagame says now. The evidence is clear. The evidence for the past 30 years have been very clear of Congo's neighbors violating Congo's territorial integrity. The challenge now is action. When people hear this, what are the actions people should take? And then from what you said about the comments online, I don't know if all these comments are Rwandans making these comments, right? Because I believe there is a university, I forgot the name, that published a report documenting the Rwandan regime's use of artificial intelligence and different LLMs being used for pushing narrative online around Rwanda's image, Rwanda's war in the DRC. It's been documented that we have online bots responding. So if I think, I wouldn't easily say that these are Rwandan speaking, right? No, I call them paper tweets, army of Kagame. Some of them are machines, others are individuals who are paid for that. But people are much more clear. And we should actually thank Larry Madowo, He asked a very simple question, and he himself was shocked by the response that Paul Kagame knows so much about the Congo. He knows that ethnic minorities are being oppressed in Congo. He knows that the M23 is a Congolese problem. He knows that the president of the Congo is inadequate. He knows that the killing in the Congo is a Congolese affair, but he doesn't know where his army is. That should really worry the world, that we have a president who does not know if his soldiers are in the camp in Rwanda, in the camp in Uganda, in the camp in the United States, or in the camp in the Congo. So that should really worry people that he actually made such statements on a live interview broadcasted on CNN.
Cool. And we've had dozen messages saying they don't understand what's happening in the Congo. What's happening? Can you break it down as simple as possible? So this question is to you, Maurice. Why is there constant fighting in the DRC? Is it to do with protecting Tutsis?
Yeah, I think it's evident, or it has been evident for the past 3 decades that what's unfolding in the DRC is a war of aggression and a war of plunder on the part of Congo's neighbors. Paul Kagame in particular of Rwanda and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. Both, they've been the constant over the past 30 years, irrespective of the alphabet soup of militia groups, AFDL, CNDP, M23, you name it. What has been constant is the Paul Kagame, who's been in power for 30 years, the Yoweri Museveni, who's been in power for 40 years. They've invaded the Congo twice, 1996, again in 1998. They've even fought each other on Congolese soil in 2000, the so-called 6-day war, where Rwandan military, Ugandan military fought each other in Kisangani over mineral resources. So the evidence is quite clear as to why they're in Congo. The United Nations have published a series of reports documenting the illicit exploitation of the Congo in 2001 to 2002. And in those reports, you go through the reports and you look at the graphs. You see the export of timber and gold and tin and coltan skyrocketing, both out of Rwanda and Uganda. Today, Rwanda is the #1 producer of coltan in the world, and they don't have the coltan that have in the Congo. So it is evident that it's not an ethnic issue, and I must add that even the Congolese government, under Joseph Kabila, for example, if it was an ethnic issue, if it's a question of protecting Tutsis, they've invited Rwanda in, in 2009, in Operation Umoja Wetu, where the Rwandan soldiers went in, with the Congolese soldiers to go after the FDLR, the arch enemy of Paul Kagame in Rwanda. So there is, it's very clear from UN reports, from human rights groups reports, the reason or the reasons why Rwanda is in the Congo. Even in this last uprising that we've seen, that began in 2021, if you read analysts and what they say about why is Rwanda in Congo right now, and it says because Rwanda felt cut out. The Congolese government and the Ugandan government were looking to build a road, establish trade routes that would go through Uganda, Congo, and Burundi, out through Tanzania, and exclude Rwanda. And Paul Kagame didn't take too kindly to that. So it's not by accident that the first area that the M23 and the Rwandan soldiers captured and occupied was Bunagana, right in the border of Uganda, and that's where the road was to begin. And since the offensive on the part of the Rwandan soldiers and the M23, that road has not, the construction has ceased on that road. So there's strategic interests, there are economic interests. Those minerals that go out through Rwanda, Rwanda gets to, book them as exports for, their, from their country. And what that does is if you have your exports rising, that helps Rwanda with its bond rating and its books and getting loans internationally. So there are a host of strategic and economic reasons why Rwanda and to some extent Uganda is in the east of the Congo. I think Museveni said it best. He's infamously stated that Congo is a banana plantation. You go in and get what you want. And both Rwanda and Uganda see the east of Congo as their sphere where they can do as they wish, especially in light of the weakness of Kinshasa and the leadership there.
Take it away, Sana.
Right. So my question would be, Kambale, what is the difference between this new offensive compared to previous M23 uprisings?
I mean, in terms of the impact on the people, it's the same. It's the same narrative that we have heard. I think that it's mostly what's different about the current M23 uprising to the 2012 uprising is that diplomatic efforts are much different. There was aggressive diplomacy at the time in 2012 to rein in Paul Kagame. Things that were done, for example, is that the US withheld not much money, only $200,000 of military aid to Rwanda, which was actually a meeting in Washington of senior Rwanda military officials. But the US doing that, Western nations, particularly Sweden, Netherlands, then you had other multilateral institutions, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, they withheld aid to Rwanda. So there was that type of diplomatic pressure which matched the military operation of SADC nations fighting alongside the Congolese army. Right now, we're not seeing the same. We're seeing a lot of condemnation. Right? I have not yet seen a Western nation withholding aid to Rwanda. I'm hearing comments that they may. Germany is rethinking the aid that's going to be given. I think Britain is doing the same. There are some traction thanks to the Communist Party of Belgium, PTB, the European Union putting pressure in the European Union for Europe to cancel the agreement between Europe and Rwanda on critical minerals. But actions have not been taken. So that's the difference that I see. But I want to come back to something very important. I think when we make this analysis, right, we lose the human context. To read that 3,000 people are dead in Goma during the taking over the Goma, we have to actually play that picture to understand actually what's happening, right? These bodies have not been identified. So we don't know if they were Congolese soldiers. We don't know if they were Wazalendos. We don't know if they were civilians. So we are going to have, out of the millions already dead, 3,000 added where we don't even know their face. I could even add, Eric, there may be people you've met when you actually went to Goma, but nobody will ever know that aspect.
100%. Speaking of the human cost, right, there's been, videos circulating, a few videos showing support for M23 on ground. And there's been attempts by mainstream media and also Rwandans online to say that M23 has the support of the people on the ground. What do you make of this, or what's your response to this?
But it's not the only video circulating. And I actually pointed out in an article I wrote on People's Dispatch that yes, it's true. There are, during the takeover of Goma, in some parts of the city of Goma, there were people celebrating the entry of the M23. Equally, there are videos of Congolese cheering the Congolese army in Goma, cheering the Wazalendo in Goma. But these videos have not had the same type of play or distribution for people to see that. But now, to address the question, why would Congolese celebrate the M23? It's partly because of the inadequacy of the Congolese government, right? It's not that they are supporting the M23. They are expressing their discontent with Kinshasa in how they have dealt with the issue of the East. But I wouldn't give it much strength, because we know that people are actually living in dire conditions, right? You have rebel militia with a gun. We have reports in the different towns that the M23 took over before Goma, where they will round up young people and enlist them into the M23 by force. So think about it. You have a meeting with the M23, they come to your house and take you out and say, we are enlisting young people. If you say no, you may be killed at the moment. So they have pressure on that. Yes, there were people celebrating, yes, to be contextualized, but there were also Congolese cheering the Congolese soldiers as they fought to maintain Goma from being taken over by the M23.
100%. Thank you for that.
The video.
Yes, and now we're going to play a video from Papi Orion, which is the cheering.
So if you saw videos going around on social media of Congolese citizens celebrating and cheering M23 after they took over Goma, what do you make of that?
That is very, very important question. And I think the world need to look at this and ask themselves a question. Why will the people even cheer for such a group that has been terrorizing them for such a long time? What is happening in this video, and what I've seen when I analyze some of the video, one of the guys in the background was saying, don't think we are clapping for these people because we want them to come. We are only trying to save our lives, because if we don't clap for them, they're going to kill us.
So that was Papi Orion from Focus Congo.
Yeah, it's interesting. Immediately after Kambale explained, and now Papi is also saying that it's a matter of life and death. So it's a very, very strange situation which the Goma citizens are finding themselves in. Let me come to you, Maurice. You know, the war in the Congo has raged on since 1996. Of course, we understand before what happened 85 and the rest. But since 96, this war has just been moving from step to step. And many people are calling it one of the deadliest conflicts and one of the most long-running conflicts in Africa. But they call it complex. Who really benefits from this so-called complex conflict?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at the conflict in the Congo in the context of the country itself and why Congo was designed by Europeans. Congo was designed as an outpost for the extraction of resources to power global industries, right? And that design and that imprint remains intact to this very day. And because of Congo's strategic location, because of its spectacular wealth, you have a coterie of individuals, institutions, nations who have benefited for decades from a destabilized and a weak Congo. It's very important for us to understand that what we see with Rwanda and Uganda in the Congo, they're basically just piling on, right? They're piling on to an already colonial environment. And that's one of the things that's particularly egregious about what we see unfolding, in that the country is already in a colonial context. It suffers from a colonial legacy. And it's a country where you have Congo's neighbors, instead of coming to the rescue of the Congolese people, like the Nkrumahs and the Sekou Tourés and the Modibo Keitas did, recognizing the centrality and importance of Congo to Africa, these two leaders, they have come to ravage the Congo for their own personal interests, for their nation's interests, for the elites within their nations. So that context where we're dealing with a colonial legacy, it's important to understand that that's still very much in place, still very much in place. And so who are the beneficiaries? A range of beneficiaries. You have the neighboring countries and their elites, Paul Kagame, you know, and Yoweri Museveni, Rwanda and Uganda. You know, you have multinational corporations. We're talking about mining companies at the bottom of the supply chain, the Glencores, the Ivanhoes. We're talking about, you know, tech companies at the top of the supply chain, the Apples and the Tesla and the Dells and the Microsoft. We're talking about multilateral institutions like the World Bank, International Monetary Fund. The World Bank wrote the mining laws for the Congo, right? Because it's a weak country, weak leadership coming out of war, and they wrote it in the interest of private capital, right? The World Bank has a sister wing called the International Finance Corporation. The International Finance Corporation was invested in mines in the Congo, right? And then, of course, you also have the local elites, you know, the ones who are making $20,000 right now, $20,000, $30,000 a month, right? While the average Congolese lives on like $2.15 a day, and that's actually about 70% of the population. So you have a coterie and a complex of institutions, individuals benefiting from Congo's weakness, from the colonial infrastructure still very much in place. And probably chief among them is Dan Gertler, right? The Israeli billionaire. He became a billionaire off the Congo, first having a monopoly of the diamond sector, then moving into, you know, the mineral sector with his compatriot, Benny Steinmetz. Both Benny Steinmetz and Dan Gertler at one point, they owned a company called Nicanor. And they, you know, they had concessions to minerals in the Congo, and they took it to the London Stock Exchange, the alternative investment market, in a public offering. At the time, the public offering was one of the largest on the alternative investment market. And, you know, their company was valued at over $1 billion, which at that time, around 2008 or so, was more than the Congolese budget, right? So you have individuals and then all the marketing firms and, you know, all the agencies that are handling the taking of companies public, like you see, you know, with Nicanor. And then also just a number of years ago, the Department of Justice in the United States, you know, filed a, you know, claim against a Wall Street hedge fund, you know, called Zif. They renamed themselves to Sculpture, but they, you know, they fined them for hundreds of millions of dollars for corrupt practices in the Congo and Africa. So, you know, in our film Crisis in the Congo, it starts out and young Congolese brother, Dedi, says that everybody wants a piece of Congo. And if you look at the data, you know, just since the period of the conflict, you'll see that you have the World Bank, the IMF, Wall Street hedge funds, marketing firms, neighboring countries, local elites, mining companies, major tech and electronic companies. So that's part of the reason why we see this ongoing conflict. The interests, what's at stake in the Congo are huge. And what that does is puts the Congolese people in a position where they, you know, almost like Lumumba when he first got elected. They really don't stand a chance unless we have people of the world rallying behind the Congolese people, sharing the narrative about what is actually unfolding, that there's a plunder taking place, there's a genocide taking place, that in the heart of the African continent, it's being gutted, not only to the detriment of the Congolese, but to the continent as a whole. The extent to which we see Congo on its knees is the same extent to which we'll see Africa on its knees. If Congo doesn't stand up, Africa will never stand up.
Wow. Wow. Oyo, please play the next video.
Congolese resources really for a long time.
Was it even during your 10 years chief of staff?
Yeah,
How did you guys do it?
Yeah.
How did you do it during your time as the chief of staff?
There are, so it's not the soldiers who do it. It is the civilian Rwandan companies, Crystal Ventures and others who do it. What the soldiers do is that for them, they just capture the area, and no soldier in Rwanda, by the way, they are very disciplined soldiers. The Rwandan soldiers are very disciplined, very well trained, and extremely professional. They don't go into mining, never. It is the civilian companies who are under the ruling party, the RPF, who do the mining, who do the selling, and the soldiers are not involved at all.
Wow, explosive. This is to you, Kambale. You see, the US and the UK have routinely condemned the M23, but just stop short all the time of taking any real action against Rwanda. Why is that?
Rwanda is a US ally, also British ally on the war on terror, but also on US interests across the world, across the African continent. But I want to go back to what Nyamwasa said, and I think it's very explosive what he said, right? But he mentioned the name of a company, right? He mentioned Crystal Ventures, and Crystal Venture is I would say an investment company. It's also a construction company. It's literally Paul Kagame's family company. So someone will hear that, don't understand that the economic branch of the Rwandan Patriotic Front is Crystal Ventures, right? So you pass, and when I'm hearing that, it's connecting to what Maurice shared about the history of the Congo. Like I'm trying to compare it to what happened also under King Leopold, right? Where you had King Leopold, which had he had what's the organization for human rights? He created a human rights institution that was led by Henry Sanford, who was the person who represented King Leopold at the Berlin Conference. So Henry Sanford created a human rights organization in Washington, D.C., lobby firm, getting the United States to get involved. Then King Leopold also had companies operating in DRC. And these companies were responsible for getting the rubber. Then he had a military force, right? And a occupying force where you had Belgians as commanding officers with Force Publique, right? Which was a bunch of Congolese put into the military force to oppress. So it was easy for King Leopold to say, I'm not chopping off the hands, I'm not killing the Congolese. The Congolese are doing that on their own, right? When the military structure was there, the companies are extracting, and then the backing of Washington. The same thing is happening now. It's so fascinating to hear Nyamwasa say that, right? Nyamwasa, a former Rwandan officer, military officer working in the intelligence for the army, clearly saying, it's not us, the soldiers. We, the soldiers, are just opening the ways, right? And the companies are coming after. So if you look at it now and you start asking yourself, if we have a name of a company where now it's alleged that they are the ones taking the minerals, are we looking at who's investing in Crystal Ventures? Are we going to see names such as Tim Cook invested in Crystal Ventures? Are we going to see names of some American companies, right? Because I remember at some point, the Rwandan Investment Board had a lot of people from Chicago who were on the board of the Rwandan Investment Board. And the Rwandan Investment Board works with Crystal Ventures. What are the connections that we need to map out about who are the people, the companies, the investment firms connected to Crystal Ventures? Because there is already an allegation that they are connected with that. So we have not seen that type of pressure, actually. No, we've seen, and that's why I think that the interview on Nyamwasa is something that we should continue to watch, to pull out all the information is presenting to us about how the economic system is connected. But I'll go back to that question. I wanted to make sure that we don't lose the point on the Crystal Ventures, being one of the companies directly benefiting and having access to Congo's minerals. But for the case of Rwanda, outside even the United States, if you think about France, France needs Rwanda in Central African Republic. France needs Rwanda in Mozambique. And spoke to a few Mozambicans who have been organizing after the rigged elections. They are very frustrated to see that the president of Mozambique sent Rwandan soldiers who are there in peacekeeping missions to actually deal with the post-electoral electoral protests. And people have been in Mozambique have been actually calling out Rwandan soldiers in Mozambique. But what are Rwandan soldiers doing in a Lusophone country? They're serving French interests in protecting Total, the oil company that's getting access to the oil and gas in Mozambique. In Central African Republic, it's the same. France is losing out in Central African Republic. They've been kicked out, I think, out of Chad, out of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and the trend is also coming down to Central African Republic. There is presence of Russia there. So France does not want to have his military presence felt there directly. So it's using his African proxy to serve that interest. Last, it's not on the European Union. Sky News a couple of days ago published an article about the European Union unwillingness to hold Rwanda accountable. And it was quite fascinating. And the consideration of the European Union is that if we cancel the agreement between Rwanda and the European Union on access of critical minerals, China and Russia will have access to Congo's minerals. So if you think about it from that context, you start asking yourself, but who will actually stop Rwanda? I still strongly believe Africans have a huge role to play because we are being pushed, right, in African solutions. Let's go to the AU and have a discussion about the peace and stability in the Congo. Let's go to Tanzania, right? But now, when our leaders are ending up in Tanzania, in AU, discussing the Congo, the biggest challenge is that the narrative that they have of what's happening in the Congo is already skewed. They've listened to Kagame for 30 years. They've listened to Museveni for 30 years. They listened to the propaganda for 30 years. They're assuming that the conflict in the Congo is a Congolese problem. So the education part of letting ordinary Africans know from Accra to Addis what is happening in the Congo is so essential because these governments are ending up in these bodies making decisions on the Congo, where they will say, well, let's have Kagame and Tshisekedi to sit down to resolve the issue. That's quite problematic when we're talking about 3,000 dead bodies in Goma. That's also quite problematic when we know that this has been ongoing for 30 years and there have been the sit down after sit downs. But if we're going from negotiation to negotiation, from peace accord to peace accord, and peace is elusive, we know the solution is not another meeting in Arusha, another meeting in Addis, another meeting in Windhoek, or any other African capital. That we must look at a very serious solution that people are not looking at. The question of justice. That the people who are committing the crimes today, when you pull up their names, you find their names all the way up in 96. Sultani Makenga has been a criminal without border, a rebel without border since the 90s. He fought in Uganda with Kagame. He fought in Rwanda with Kagame. And he's in DRC today, fighting. But the same people continue. I will end by the one more point, which I saw in the report, the December 2024 report of the UN. And this came up because the ICC is now investigating the situation in the Kivu from 2022 to present, and they're looking for evidence. When I was reading the report, I was shocked to read the name of Thomas Thomas Lubanga in the report. The reason why I was shocked is that Thomas Lubanga was arrested. He had an arrest warrant. He was arrested. He was sent to The Hague. He was tried. He was convicted, found guilty, convicted, and sentenced to 14 years in prison. And then the community he served his term in Congo, in Kinshasa, at the Makala prison. So when we think about the RCC and we're sending someone there, tried, found guilty, people celebrate. But he served his term, his sentence in Kinshasa at the Makala prison. He was released, if I'm not mistaken, in 2021 after serving 14 years. I'm reading the 2024 report, the December 2024 report. They are documenting how right now he's recruiting combatants for the M23. The same guy who was at ICC, found guilty for crimes, served 14 years, back in Congo today, and he's still operating with rebels, recruiting people, traveling, according to the UN group of experts, to Rwanda, to Uganda, meeting Corneille Nangaa, the leader of the AFC M23, meeting with the M23 soldiers and the Rwandan and Ugandan military instructors supporting the M23. Then we started saying then that this question of international justice is not taken seriously when it comes to the Congo. That we keep recycling the same rebels over and over, and justice is continuing to become elusive. But what the Congolese people they have proposed, before we start thinking about the ICC, I think that the evidence should be submitted to the ICC. The Congolese people have always asked for an international tribunal for Congo. Yes, the Hague can exist, but they want Congolese to have a tribunal where they can see those who committed the crimes held accountable in their country, right? And created as an international tribunal so that Congo can have an international jurisdiction of sending arrest warrant for those who are not inside of the Congo. But that process has not been supported. This is one of the recommendations of the UN Mapping Exercise report, that in order for peace in the Congo to return, we must solve the question of justice and holding perpetrators of violence and crimes in the Congo accountable.
I wanted to jump in quickly about Nyamwasa, that I think was instructive. He was doing an interview in South Africa. Why was he in South Africa? Well, he's a dissident. You know, Nyamwasa and Patrick Karegeya, they bolted. These folks, this person who's talking on that video, that's Kagame's right-hand man. And they left, right? Now, when they became dissidents, Kagame made it clear, we're going to hunt you down like dogs, right? So he has survived a number of assassination attempts in South Africa, on South African soil. Unlike his partner who left with him, Patrick Karegeya, who was assassinated by Kagame's goons in 2013. And that assassination prompted the South African government to break off diplomatic relations with Rwanda. Now, why is this instructive? Because Kagame not only functions with impunity in Rwanda itself and in the Congo, but really globally. And he's able to do that because he's got the backing of powerful nations like the United States, the United Kingdom. He sends assassins out in Europe, Belgium, elsewhere. And you know what happens when he sends those assassins out to go after dissidents? The intelligence services of the UK, of the United States, warn the people that Kagame is coming after you, right? Can you imagine that? They don't, on US soil or on UK soil, they don't sanction him. They don't hold him to account. They enable him to operate freely globally. And that's what led to him, kidnapping Paul Rusesabagina, the real life hero of Hotel Rwanda, out of the United Arab Emirates, and brought him back he rendered him, just like the CIA used to do, or probably still does with folks, and bring them back to Guantanamo. He got Rusesabagina, brought him back to Rwanda, put him in jail, right? So he's been allowed this latitude, right, to function like a gangster, like his suitors. So he's functioning like the US functions, or like the UK functions, or like France functions. So this gives us a window into why he's able to operate in Congo with rampant impunity, why there is no accountability, and why Kambali says the demand for justice. Because it's not like there hasn't been an attempt to hold him to account, right? However, whenever the Congolese people or the Spanish courts, for example, the Spanish courts issued an arrest warrant for 40 of Rwanda's top officials under this principle of universal jurisdiction, right? The same principle they used to go after Pinochet. And they nabbed one of Kagame's top officials, a General Karenza in the UK. They arrested him in the UK. And they were going to try him for the crimes, war crimes that he's committed in Rwanda, in the Congo. He was part of the 6-day war when Rwanda's soldiers fought Ugandan soldiers in Kisangani. And do you know who came to his defense? None other than the wife of Tony Blair, Cherie Blair, was his attorney, defended him, and he got off, right? So Rwanda they're able to operate with impunity in Rwanda, in the Congo, and globally as well. And the only reason why he's able to do that is because he's got the backing of the West. The Congolese were sharing with me a saying that they have. You know, you say, when you see a cow in a tree, you know he didn't get there by himself. You know, Kagame's like a cow in a tree. Somebody put him up there. Somebody's got his back. And the US has got his back. The UK's got his back. And most recently, certainly, France has got his back because they're one of the obstacles in the European Union for some kind of accountability being meted out against Kagame. So this is really critical for people to understand. This is not just a Kagame affair, a Rwanda affair, a Museveni affair, a Ugandan affair. It's the global elite, the West. You know, that's why you see Kagame, he's at Davos. He's invited there. The red carpet is open for him. You know, he gets access to CNN. We haven't seen the Congolese foreign minister. I don't know, Kambali, if she's been on yet to lay out her point, but he's got access, right? So he can get on and spin his narrative. So there's a whole complex that's behind him that enables him to get away with the crimes that he commits in the Congo. And those crimes that he commits, the war crimes, crimes against humanity, possibly genocide, they're cleansed on the international level, right? Protected by the US, protected by the UK, but also the propaganda, the high-octane propaganda campaign. Visit Rwanda, the jersey of the Arsenal football team, Saint-Germain in France, right? Formula One, right? The stars are brought to Rwanda, the Dave Chappelle's and the Kendrick Lamar's and John Legend, who's supposed to go there on February 21st. They, by virtue of them going and presenting Kagame as a upstanding global citizen, what that does, it covers the mass murders, the millions of people who have been sacrificed in the Congo, the hundreds of thousands of women who have been raped, the young children whose heads have been decapitated. That's what's being covered by this high-octane propaganda campaign. So there's a complex that's there, a system that's there, a structure that's there that enables them to get away with what he gets away with and treat the Congolese lives as disposable.
Yeah, thank you for that, Maurice. And I'm glad you mentioned about these celebrities, because I've had a few direct messages where people say, why should John Legend not go to Rwanda? It's not the Rwandan citizens that are doing this. Why should they suffer? But what they don't realize is that when they have these concerts, the last one with Kendrick Lamar, Paul Kagame is on stage. He's on stage with Kendrick Lamar at the end. It's not just a music concert. This is a tactic of soft power, the same as the Visit Rwanda, which is on the Arsenal kit. It's all about softening, much like Saudi Arabia with these boxing events. It's about softening the image of these states. Saudi Arabia, they have more executions than any other country in the world, but then they have a boxing event, so people think, oh, maybe I can go there, maybe it's not bad. And in Rwanda, they're here in the Congo. There's mass rape, there's recruiting of child soldiers, there's taxation on mines, and a host of other crimes. But the last thing that the typical person will see was Kendrick Lamar in there, and then now John Legend. So I think that was just an important point to make. Now, my question is, another thing that we've got online, some people have said that we've made too much of Rwanda's role, that we focus too much on Rwanda and Uganda, that they're just the middlemen, that we need to talk more about the West in all of this. And I know both of you do that, but do you think from an activist perspective, that's also true? So when we saw the conflict in Gaza, you couldn't get access to Israeli officials. So what the activists of Code Pink and other people were doing, they'd go to US officials. Secretary Antony Blinken had his press conference interrupted several occasions. The press secretary had their press conference interrupted. Should we as activists and journalists, should we direct our focus more on the France, on the European Union, on the United States, on the UK, and interrupt their press conferences, much like the activists did when it came to Gaza? So that question was to you, Maurice.
Oh, Kambale, go ahead. He was saying something. Go ahead first, Kambale.
Okay, sorry. Now, I think that in the case of the situation in the Congo, even when we talk about Rwanda and interviewing Rwandan officials and so on, and no access, the narrative for Rwanda for the past 30 years exists. The Congolese narrative is what's missing. Most people are getting to know about the Congo now, right? So sometimes when I hear people say, well, you focus too much on Rwanda, I'm saying, but you didn't even know about the Congo before last year, right? So most people don't even know what has been unfolding in the Congo. So it's important to lift up the story. Yes, it's very important to, in these press conferences, to lift up the story of the Congo. So we've had some victories of different journalists at different times. They've asked very important questions. Not just that, we've had young Congolese asking the most important questions, right? I'll use an example of when Hillary Clinton was in Kinshasa and met with Congolese students in Kinshasa, and they asked her one of the most important questions about U.S. interference in the Chinese contract. So young Congolese also have been at the forefront of it. Last action I think I saw, I don't know if I should call it an action, but there was a press conference of Donald Trump after the plane crash in the United States. I think it was a United Airlines plane that crashed in one of the states in the US. And a journalist did ask Trump about what is unfolding in Goma and Rwanda, and he deviated the question. And I've seen people extrapolate, what that actually means for Trump to say that's a very serious problem, but this is not the appropriate forum to discuss it. When I heard it, these are the responses that officials give when they don't have information. It's a polite way to say, I'm going to research more. I think he was caught off guard, and I don't think that he had in his view what is happening. But in the end, it's up to all of us to continue to ask the pertinent question. I don't know if it's even appropriate to say that I myself have been very impressed by what Africa Stream has been doing, right? You are doing the research, and you are able to take what people say is a complex issue into a way that's digestible to the ordinary citizen. We need to do more of that. And there are things that need to be dispelled, right? The question of ethnic conflict. How do you explain it to a large audience about what is actually unfolding? And you are doing that. The question of the Congolese people's responsibility, that they need to be more on that way as well, to show actually what Congolese people themselves are doing. And I will always lift up the names of the thousands of young Congolese who died in 2015. Most people don't remember them during the Telema uprising, right? You had young Congolese who stood up against Kabila, who wanted to change the constitution to maintain power. They took it to the streets. They blocked the city of Kinshasa for 2 weeks when the government shut off the internet. We know, I believe Maurice was on the ground at the time. I think he even attended to some of the wounded in some of the hospitals in the city. But we know hundreds were killed. And beyond us giving that, making that statement that there were hundreds, that same year, a mass grave was found in the capital city of Kinshasa in Maluku with hundreds of bodies there. And when the government was asked about these bodies, they said these are the bodies of people in the morgue that families did not come and claim, and fetuses from hospitals, which die from either abortion, from complication at birth. But we know those were the young Congolese, right? So Congolese have always been fighting. So it's how do we share when people ask, what are the Congolese people doing to hold the government accountable, to show all the actions that Congolese have done from Lumumba to even present time with the Telema movement, where they've held the government accountable. And that's the essential part now that for when people hear is how do I not join in solidarity with Congolese as the struggle to have a say in the decision-making process in the government, while holding also the external forces that make it hard to change the situation in the country.
Just quickly to Eric's question, really your question is a tactical one, but it also has ideological roots to it, right? Now, tactically, we can interrupt press conferences. But we probably have to recruit elderly or middle-aged white women to do it, because a brother going up to interrupt anything, you're just asking for a beatdown, right? They're not gonna grab you and like pull you out, gently. So the Code Pig folks, the tactic is on point. Get some white women and go and have the white women make noise, because you're not gonna have no brothers up in there making noise. You'll be disappeared. So, however, when it comes to the Congo, though, as it relates to tactics, right? When we talk about the colonial legacy, we're not just talking about the structural features of the colonial legacy, the plunder, lack of development, but we're also talking about the prism through which the world sees the Congo and Africa. Remember, Africa is a dark continent. Congo is the heart of darkness, right? So what that automatically triggers is for people to say, well, whatever has happened there, that's what has always happened and will continue to always happen. They're killing each other. They're backward. They're not fully human. They're imbued with atavistic qualities that's just not going to change, right? So you have to break down this colonial prism through which people view the Congo so that they can see Congolese as fully human beings. And as seeing as fully human beings, that means they'll be worthy of investigation, worthy of inquiry, worthy of empathy, right? And then worthy of solidarity, right? So there's these layers that we have to go through, massive education campaign that combats, hundreds of years of white supremacy, and where the Congo itself, right, the heart of darkness, is emblematic, the quintessential example of the backward African that's not worthy of being recognized as a full human being. So that's how you can have 6 million people at least perishing, right? And the population of many countries around the world without hardly a peep, right? Because those lives are not valued. So there's this, when it comes to tactics and strategies, you also have to locate them and center them in the ideological battle that that needs to be fought in terms of dismantling the colonial prism through which people see Black people see Africans, and which people see those who are in the heart of Africa, the heart of darkness. And that's for Black and white. That's just the culture that's out there. So all of us have to combat that in order to get to a place where we can see Congolese are fully human and worthy of what Lumumba proclaimed from the grave, right? In his last letter to his wife Pauline, he said to the Congolese people, he said, "We're not alone. Africa, Asia, free and liberated people from every corner of the world will be found by the side of the Congolese." So we're in the process of fulfilling on Lumumba's vision right now. And there are a range of tactics, a range of strategies that we have to deploy, and we can do it more, we can do it on a grander scale, and we have to, right? And that's why I cannot overstate this. We're not just talking about the Congo. We're talking about Africa, right? Fanon said it. It said the fate of all of us is at stake in the Congo, right? So we're talking, so we need Africans on the forefront, Africans at home, Africans abroad, rallying behind the Congolese people, because the fate of all of us is at stake in the Congo.
Cool. So this question is for you, Kambale. This is a question we get a lot. I have my own suspicions, but I'm not sure. So hopefully you can provide some clarification. How much of a role do you think the administration of President Felix Tshisekedi has in all of this? Is it just a case of them being ineffective, or is it a case of them being complicit?
It's how you look at the issue. We can talk for hours about the incompetency of the Congolese government. But what is the issue? The regime of Tshisekedi is not making a nation violate territorial integrity of the Congo, right? Because yes, Tshisekedi is problematic. He did not win the 2018 presidential election. There was a deal. Congolese have resisted that. And there are many issues still with even how the country is led, from what Maurice shared earlier. Our MPs get $21,000 a month as a salary. The so-called mercenary think they were paid at least $5,000 a month, with a number, right? An official total number of 2,250 mercenaries were hired by the Congolese army, yet we saw about 200 of them who fled. Like, where are the others, right? So, which means there are about $400 million unaccounted for of the money spent for that. So we can go on and on about the issues. The issue of the Congolese government trying to change the constitution of the Congo to allow Tshisekedi to run for his first new term at the next election, where the term will be 7 years, right? And remove term limits. All those internal issues, Congolese are fighting it. But that does not mean that a neighboring country should literally violate territorial integrity and bring at least 4,000 Rwanda Defence Forces soldiers on Congolese soil. That's when it mixes the issues. And I think even in the clips of Nyamwasa, when he was addressing the question of ethnic minority in the Congo, he tried to also explain it that way, that we are mixing the issue. Yes, the Congolese government can be held accountable. They have a lot to say. There is a reform that needs to be done in the military. But all of that, right? The question now will be, what are Congolese people doing? Well, they have been holding the government accountable. They screamed to the African Union, to the African institutions in the 2018 election that there is a rigged election in our country. But the African Union did not do much. It's like what happened with Bazoum, right? When the people in Niger were fighting and saying that there was a rigged election in in Niger, no one listened to the people of Niger until there was a transformation in the country with the new leadership coming through from the military. It's the same thing there. Yes, the Congolese government they have a role to play. There are reforms that need to be done. Congolese are even fighting their own government, but that does not condone the behavior of a neighboring country violating territorial integrity, looting resources, killing civilians in total impunity.
Cool. We have a video from Cloud Gatabuke, who's a Rwandan genocide survivor. He's going to talk about Rwandan troops expanding to mineral regions. Oya, if you could play that video, please.
Congo aiding M23. Why then are they expanding towards mineral regions, mineral-rich regions, and not staying at Rwanda's border to defend Rwanda, if this is really an issue of their security?
If it's about security, why not secure your borders? Why are you securing the mines? You know, and again, that's because this is an issue of national security for Rwanda. This is an issue of national plunder and national stealing for Rwanda, for Paul Kagame, who is going into the Congo for plundering resources to not only for himself and his generals, but also for these multinationals that he's dealing with.
Okay, we're running out of time, so we won't get your thoughts. I think Cloud said it perfectly there. I'm just going to ask you a question of a developing story. Uganda has now sent an additional 1,000 troops to DRC. Allegedly, that's at least how the mainstream media is reporting it, to support the Congolese troops' fight against M23. I'm laughing because, you know, we know Uganda's role in backing M23. What is Uganda's current role in the war, and why have they just sent 1,000 extra troops? And that's an open question. Either one of you can take it.
Wow. Go first, Kamal. Go ahead, Kamal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always worried when I'm put in a position to become spokesperson for Kagame or Museveni. The actions are very well known already, right? Before even the statements, as of last week, I think I can't even disclose that. I have family in Beni. They've already seen the Ugandan People's Defence Forces in Beni before even any press said anything about the military presence there. So I think that the increased number of soldiers crossing borders required a public statement before it becomes known that they are already on Congolese soil. The other thing you have to also know is that the M23, right, are being trained in Uganda and are crossing the border back and forth to Uganda. So, and according to the UN group of experts also, Ugandan military officers are instructors to the M23 combatants who are being recruited. And across the border, if you see where the M23 took over, the town of Bunagana is right at the border of Uganda. So Uganda has easy access to the Kivu province, but also have had their own troops there officially and unofficially. But they are just making it. Other context also to connect it to is what Nyamosa shared, that Paul Kagame and Museveni, though they had tensions for a while, were able to reconcile a year or so ago, which opened the doors on the cooperation that we're seeing of supporting the M23. Right? That way, you have the Ugandan military officers training the M23, as well as Rwanda military officers flying into Uganda to train also the M23. But in the end, it's a story that we've heard before. If you and I were literally transported in time in 1996, we'll be having the same discussion. Because in 1996, when the invasion started, there was a discussion of ethnic majority, right? You had Bizi Makara going to the press saying that the Banyabuleng are being oppressed and we're going to make it into a country. Few weeks and months later, in October of 1996, the AFDL is created with the face of the movement being Laurent Kabila, while having Ugandan People's Defence Forces and Rwandan Defence Forces as part of that. But journalists, asking questions, is Rwanda dead? Rwanda denied. And Rwanda will also say at that time, would also say at the time that they will do everything to protect the national security. So we've seen this story for 30 years. And that's why it's very frustrating for Congolese that for 30 years, we have allowed this narrative to continue. And thankfully, the difference that I see between now and even 96, more and more people are now asking questions that this story doesn't make any sense. After 30 years, why do we continue to hear this narrative that people are inquiring and we should expose? Uganda is there for its own economic interests. Rwanda is in Congo for its economic interests, and in the process of plunder, Congolese are dying in thousands and millions.
A quick question:
Well,
were you saying that the 1,000 soldiers were there to go after the M23 or to be with the M23? I didn't quite hear what the rationale was being presented.
Yeah, the way it was being reported in the mainstream media, I think a Reuters article to be specific, was that you get 1,000 additional Ugandan troops. I think there's already several thousand already in
4,000.
4,000 already in Congo, but they reported 1,000 extra Ugandan troops are there to support the Congolese in their fight against M23.
Okay,
It's a ludicrous.
I see.
It's a ludicrous suggestion, but that's how
Yeah,
it's been reported.
yeah, it's a ludicrous suggestion. I mean, the Ugandan soldiers are already there in the Congo at the behest of the Congolese government, right? What they call the Operation Shuja, to go after the Allied Democratic Forces, which is a quote unquote rebel group that's a Ugandan rebel group, right? So they're already there. But it would seem unusual to me, Museveni himself, after the emergency meeting of the East African Community last week, published on his Twitter page the account of the meeting. And the central account of the meeting coming out of the East African Community, which neither Burundi or the Congo attended, was that the Congolese government should enter into negotiations with the M23. So that's the policy of the East African Community, which is in alignment with the Nairobi Accords, right? So it would seem unusual to me that then now Uganda would be sending soldiers in to go fight against M23. I would have to, it doesn't add up with what's been unfolding in terms of, the communiques coming out of the East African Community.
Just to jump on that one, the statement is from there is a press release directly from the Ugandan military that they are moving the 1,000 troops to the border to protect for the security. And the international press has framed it from the context of fighting with the Congolese government and with the M23. So the communique from the Ugandan military is completely different than what the Reuters actually stated in his article.
Okay.
Thanks for clearing that up. Well, now we're seeing South African peacekeepers being targeted with the killing of, I think there were 9 South African.
Up to 14 of them now.
14.
But how many were South African?
I think
14 South African, 3 from Malawi.
Okay. Malawi and yes. So now we're seeing some change in the regional dynamics. What do you make of that?
I'm not sure there's any change in the regional dynamics. You have to understand, the African Union over the past decade or so has been engaged in on several levels, right? Around 2012, the African Union put up the idea of having African forces go in to support the UN mission in the Congo. The UN strengthened its mission to an offensive one and introduced what they call the Force Intervention Brigade. This is in 2012, where you had the South Africans, you had the Tanzanians, you had the Malawians, all send their soldiers in to defend the Congo and fight with the UN against the Rwandan soldiers and the M23 then, right? That's on the military front. The African Union in this current reiteration or reappearance of the M23 has charged the president of Angola, João Lourenço, to head up what they call the Luanda Accords. This started in 2022, which will be able to create a process whereby Tshisekedi and the Congo will be in dialogue with Rwanda and Kagame, to bring about a peaceful end to the crisis. And in late December, they thought that they had arrived at an agreement that was going to lead to peace. And Tshisekedi and Kagame were supposed to meet in Luanda, but Kagame didn't show up, right? He was a no-show at the peace talks. So the African Union has been engaged on that level. The Southern African Development Community has been engaged in sending soldiers. And now what we see, which is really interesting, is that the Southern African Development Community, SADC, has a more robust response to Rwanda, right? And we've even seen that come out in exchanges, public exchanges, between the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, where they apparently talked on the phone. Ramaphosa issued a statement about the conversation. Ramaphosa even said that Rwandan soldiers firing at South African soldiers, South Africa would consider that a declaration of war. And Kagame came after. This is all taking place on X, social media, and basically said, you know, well, all that Cyril Ramaphosa was saying, they're lies. You know, maybe he even went on to say maybe he was speaking in his local language, which I don't understand. You know, so and at the end of it, Kagame basically said, well, if you're ready to go to war, we're ready to go to war, right? We've seen Kagame with his posture before. He's like, we're ready to go to war. When Tshisekedi said that, wanted to attack Rwanda, Kagame said, well, you want war? He's like, we know war, right? We know war. So Kagame is no stranger to threatening other African heads of state, right? In 2012, when Tanzania played a crucial role in upending the M23, Kagame went after the then president, Ajawa Kikwete. You know, he basically said, Kikwete, I will hit you, right? And everybody knows what that means. So, you know, Kagame he's a thug, a gangster, and you know, he's throwing his whatever weight he has around because he's got the backing, and that has disrupted the African unity, let's say. Even when South Africa sent the soldiers into the Congo, Rwanda issued a communique to the African Union, calling on the African Union not to endorse South African troops going into the Congo. And the African Union rebuffed Kagame. So where are we today? We see Southern African Development Community taking a certain posture. We see the East African Community, which is basically made up of Rwanda and Uganda, so you can guess the kind of posture that they have. They're calling for dialogue with the M23. And the two of them are supposed to meet either tomorrow or Saturday. Southern African Development Community, East African Community. So we'll be watching that closely to see what kind of resolutions come out of those meetings.
Thank you, thank you. I'd like to direct this to Kambale, since you spoke about China a while back. And you know, China is it's a dominant player in the Congo mining sector, but their role is talked about less. What do you think, or how does China factor into this conflict?
I don't think they're talking about China less. I actually think they're talking about China much more. I was hinting at a young Congolese I was talking to a while back in terms of China's action in the Congo is very easily found. Like if you go online and search for Chinese illegal mining, it will come up. Or Chinese arrested in the Congo, it will come up. So in terms of China's action from the perspective of trying to fall into the Chinese hysteria, that's the perspective I'm trying to come up with, it exists. But I think the way we talk about China in the Congo is quite skewed. Right? China is in the Congo in a commercial enterprise. And Chinese businesses are engaged in the Congo in a commercial enterprise. Of course, we do have some Chinese businesses who are mistreating workers, there may be some Chinese businesses, not maybe actually it's a fact, there were Chinese businesses that had mining licenses that were not approved, but they were operating. But at the same time, China has a state, and the DRC had one of the most important mining deals in the history of the Congo, whereby they needed to build infrastructure in exchange for mineral resources. This deal was changed completely thanks to Hillary Clinton, or I would say thanks to the US pressure and the IMF World Bank pressure on the Congo to renegotiate the Chinese contract, where now a $9 billion deal became $6 billion. But in the conflict in itself that we are talking about, China is not involved in arming any rebel group in the Congo to destabilize the Congo. There is no such evidence that exists. What I do know is that the Chinese government allowed for Congo to buy CH-4 drones which were used to actually document Rwanda Defence Force soldiers on Congolese soil. So Congo, thanks to the Chinese drone, were able to prove at the UN Security Council that you have Rwandan soldiers there. Right? So if we look at it from the framework, then we see that if we want to talk about China in the Congo, the fact that Chinese companies have most of the mining sites in the Congo in terms of operating there. About 80% of the mines, I think, in the southern part of the Congo or the entirety are owned either in whole or in part by Chinese. Then you know it's a enterprise. But the other aspect of that, which is very important when we're talking about the M23, you have the Polish president flying into Kigali, going to the Genocide Memorial, meeting with Paul Kagame, promising support to the Rwanda regime. And a Polish company sold an anti-drone radar to the Rwandan regime. And we know, according to the UN group of experts, that the M23 are using anti-drone equipments. We can track it down to Poland. Right? The surface-to-air missile vehicle found in the DRC in the UN group of experts report was actually tracked down by French intelligence, and they knew the matriculation of the vehicle, that they could point out that the surface-to-air missile that the M23 is using in the Congo is part of the Rwandan military stock. And we can also add the European Union gave Rwanda 20 million euros of military equipment. Well, the UN group of experts again is saying that Rwanda's military is in the Congo using SHORAD system, surface-to-air missile, GPS jamming equipment. Now, you can't even fly humanitarian planes in the eastern part of Congo because you won't know where to land because the rebels are jamming the GPS system, right? So that's not what China is doing in the Congo. So we have to know that as we look at China's framework of operating in the Congo, it can be dealt with in terms of the capitalist way of engaging in terms of the corporations, but the states of China has supported the Congolese government or the Congolese people as a whole in development and also in pressure at the UN Security Council to bring about peace and stability.
Thank you for that, Kambale. I think I'll throw this question to Maurice. We've had, we've spoken of all the different players in the current war and in the vicious cycle of war that's been going on for over 30 years in the Congo. And so the question would be, what would it actually take to bring real long-lasting peace in the DRC?
That's a huge question right there. First of all, we'll start well in terms of bringing an end to the conflict. We saw in 2012 what it took to end the conflict at that time. International bodies having the political will. We're talking about foreign governments, the suitors of Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni, taking strong stance, withholding military aid. We saw Congo's neighbors rallying behind it, those coming from the Southern African Development Community. We saw activists, particularly in the United States and the United Kingdom, rallying to put pressure on their governments for them to be engaged in a strong way diplomatically. And finally, we saw the leadership from Congolese military leaders in this instance, the General Goma of Kisangani Oriental Province, and Mamadou Ndala, who is a brave Congolese military leader who led his soldiers to defeat the M23, right? And both of these leaders were assassinated, right? Under suspicious means. We don't know who did it, but we know what they did in terms of defending the Congolese people, in terms of putting their lives on the line for the Congolese people, was against the interest of those who want to see Congo remain on its knees. So it's going to take, the sons and daughters of Congo to bring about peace. That is to say, they're going to have to strengthen their institutions. The population as a whole is going to have to be organized in a way that not only can it remove the current political class, right, but also introduce a new political class that has the spirit of Lumumba, right? Meaning that they love their people, they're willing to sacrifice for their country. Now, the political class that we've been dealing with since the assassination of Lumumba, for all intents and purposes, is a political class created by the CIA, right? If you read the chief of station, Larry Devlin, in his book, Chief of Station Congo, he lays out in painstaking detail how he created what they call the Binza group, or the Binza boys, right? The corrupt elite that was corrupted by the Central Intelligence Agency. So what the United States did was to overthrow the political class of Lumumba, that class that was Pan-Africanist, that class that was regionalist, that is to say they didn't subscribe to one particular ethnic group or one particular region of the Congo. They wanted to bring Congo together as a region. It wasn't, an ethnic enterprise. So that was destroyed by the Central Intelligence Agency. And instead, what they put in was the class of the Binza boys, the Binza group. And that's what's obtained to this very day. So that corrupt class, that comprador class that served the metropole, that has to be pushed aside. And you have to have the masses of the Congolese rising up in a way to protect their interests, to strengthen their institutions. And it is only then that we're going to see a Congo that is stable and that exercises authority over the entirety of the country in the interest and on behalf of the Congolese masses, right? So that's where the ultimate solution lies, as we've been discussing with our Congolese brothers and sisters. I'm sure Kambali can chime in on that as well, in terms of a route or a path to long-lasting peace and stability.
Yeah. Kambali, would you like to add something to that?
No, it will be redundant. I think Maurice was much more clear on that. But the last point is, it's important for the world to know that Congolese are not sitting idly by and waiting for the world to come and save them. There are people, even in Goma today, in the context of the M23 controlling the city of Goma, they are still fighting today, right? Even in the capital city, if you follow what happened for the past week, with all the contradictions of the Congolese parliament, that there were members of parliament who organized to force the Congolese parliament to have an extraordinary session of the parliament when the government did not want to have that, right? There are young Congolese actually connecting with one another. I guess not all can be disclosed online, discussing in a very blunt way what we need to do, where we need to go. What we expect our allies around the world to do is, as we are organizing, our challenge is the external influence make it hard for us to organize. So, for example, the external influence on the Congolese government is whenever we will mobilize and organize in the streets, and people are holding the government official accountable, when Congolese are arrested by the Congolese government, the world doesn't know Congolese youth are in prison, right? While they're fighting for justice. So how do we get allies as we are struggling to transform our nation to stay with us in that battle? Will be critical. But I wouldn't want to add, I think Maurice is on point about strengthening the Congolese institution, removing the current political class as an internal solution. And the external forces, our allies, have to help us put pressure on the negative forces against the Congo while we organize inside of our country.
Thank you. Very well said. I think that's a good point to end it. That is all the time we had for today. And I believe I'll be in the right mind to say, our hearts go out to all the people who've been affected by the devastation. We stand with Congo, we stand with the Congolese. Thank you so much, Kambale and Maurice, for joining us in this conversation. As I said in the beginning, it's, I believe, one of the most important one yet. And we are continuing to keep the conversation open, and we will invite Maurice and Kambale again to help us to sift through all the noise. But thank you so much. That's where we can end it. I've been Eric Davala.
I've been Ahmed Kabelo.
I'm Scenario.
Thank you so much. Peace, love, and unity.
Peace.
Peace, peace, peace.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. That was great.